My name is Marta. I am 41 years old, and I was born in Wrocław in the southwest of Poland, in a city that was rebuilt from rubble after the war and that carries that history in its bones. Beautiful on the surface and full of something harder underneath. I have lived in Dublin for 15 years, long enough that I sometimes dream in English, long enough that my Polish has a strange flatness to it when I go back, like an instrument slightly out of tune. I have a good life here, a job I am proud of, a husband who loves me carefully and well, a small house with a garden that floods every winter because Ireland, and a weight I have been carrying since I was 22 years old that I told almost no one about for almost 2 decades. The weight had a name. His name was Tomasz. And on a Tuesday evening in October 3 years ago, he knocked on my door. I need to go back 17 years to explain who Tomasz was to me, because the story of the knock on the door only makes sense if you understand what came before it. In 2004, when Poland joined the European Union and the doors opened the way they opened for so many of us, I was 24 and living in Wrocław and working as a bookkeeper for a construction firm that was already laying off staff because the skilled workers were leaving for England and Ireland and Germany, where the money was better. I had a degree in accounting and no particular future in the country I was standing in, and a friend who had already gone to Dublin who called me every week to tell me about the wages and the crack, a word I did not know yet but would come to understand completely. What I did not tell my friend, what I did not tell anyone, was that 2 years earlier, when I was 22 and newly heartbroken from a relationship that had ended badly and making decisions from the particular recklessness of someone who feels she has nothing left to lose, I had had a brief relationship with a man named Krzysztof. He was 34, married, and I had not known he was married until 4 months in, at which point I ended it immediately and completely, and then discovered 6 weeks later that I was pregnant. What followed were the 3 months that I have spent the subsequent 17 years trying to think about as little as possible. I was 22. I had no money, no support, no partner, a job that was already uncertain, and a mother who I knew would not survive the shame of an unmarried daughter with a child by a married man in the way that women of her generation understood shame as a thing that spread to everyone around it, that contaminated families, that needed to be managed above all else. I made a decision that I have never for a single day believed was the wrong one, and that I have also never for a single day stopped carrying the weight of. I carried the pregnancy to term. I placed the baby for adoption through a private arrangement that my mother organized, and that I was not given a great deal of choice about once she was involved. A couple in Krakow. Good people, my mother said. Educated, a home with a garden, a boy. I held him for 2 hours before they took him. I named him Tomasz, which they kept, which was the one thing I asked for and which the couple agreed to because they were, as my mother said, good people. Then I went home to Wrocław and I went back to work, and 8 months later I got on a plane to Dublin, and I built a different life around the hole that had been left by that 2 hours and those 2 months of decisions, and I never told anyone. I met Kieran in Dublin 3 years after I arrived. He was Irish, 32 to my 27, a secondary school history teacher with a dry sense of humor and an inexhaustible patience for other people that I found first admirable and then, gradually, deeply attractive in the way of qualities that take time to reveal their value. We got together slowly, in the way of people who are both slightly cautious for reasons they haven't fully disclosed. We married when I was 30 in a small ceremony in the west of Ireland where his family was from, with the Atlantic visible from the church windows, and his aunties crying, and my mother flying over from Roswave, looking simultaneously proud and slightly overwhelmed by the quantity of Irish sentiment in the room. I did not tell Kieran about Tomasz before the wedding. I want to be honest about this because it matters to the rest of the story. I told myself there was nothing to tell. The adoption was closed, the boy had a family, the decision was made and finished and sealed. I told myself that some things that happen to you at 22 do not need to follow you into a marriage at 30. I was lying to myself and I knew it, and I did it anyway because I was afraid. And because the fear was older and deeper than my relationship with Kieran, older than Dublin, older than the plane I had taken to escape Roswave, all the way back to the moment my mother took the situation out of my hands, and I let her because I had nothing left with which to resist. Ciaran and I could not have children. This became clear in the first years of trying, through the particular bureaucracy of fertility testing that I now know intimately. The appointments, the blood work, the statistics delivered carefully by doctors who have learned to say difficult things without their faces giving away too much. In my case, the issue was mine, not his, a structural problem that made carrying a pregnancy to term very unlikely. Ciaran absorbed this information with the same steadiness he absorbed most difficult information, which was to go quiet for a while and then to emerge having processed it into something manageable and to continue. I absorbed it with a private grief that had an extra dimension he couldn't see. Because I had carried a pregnancy to term once and had not kept the child, and now the option of doing either was closing, and the arithmetic of that was not something I could explain to him. We looked into adoption. The Irish system is long and difficult, and we began the process and found ourselves in the particular limbo of people waiting for something they cannot control the timeline of. We were still in that limbo on the October Tuesday when the knock came. I was alone in the house. Kieran had after-school supervision on Tuesdays. I was working at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang, which in my neighborhood usually means a delivery or a neighbor. And I opened the door without particular expectation and found a young man standing on my step. Tall, dark-haired, 19 or 20 years old, with a face that I understood in a single second the way you understand something that has always been true and has simply been waiting to be seen. He had my father's jaw, which I have also, which I see in the mirror every morning. He was wearing a gray jacket, and he was holding a piece of paper, and he looked more frightened than I was, which I would not have thought possible in that moment. He said in Polish, which hit me like cold water because I had not been spoken to in Polish unexpectedly in years. "Are you Marta? Marta Kowalska." The name I was born with, not the name I have now. I said yes, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. He said, "My name is Tomasz. I was born in Roswave in November 1999. I think you might be my birth mother." I let him in. I don't remember deciding to. My body simply moved back from the door and he came in, and I brought him to the kitchen table where my laptop was still open, and I sat across from him, And I looked at my father's jaw on a 19-year-old's face, and I thought, with a clarity that was almost hallucinatory, that the whole I had been carrying for 17 years had just walked through my front door wearing a gray jacket. We talked for 2 hours before Kieran came home. Tomasz had been raised in Krakow, as my mother had told me, by a couple named Pan and Pani Wisniewska, who had, he said, been good parents in the practical sense, present, providing, not unkind. He had always known he was adopted. When he turned 18, they had given him what information they had, which was not much: a name, a city, a year. He had spent a year piecing together the rest. He was now studying computer science in Krakow and had come to Dublin on a student travel program and had used the trip to find me. I asked him what he wanted. It was the question I had been afraid to ask, and the one I needed to ask, and he answered it carefully, like someone who had rehearsed it. I don't want to disrupt your life. I just wanted to see you, to know where I came from, to understand the first part of the story, the part that came before the Wisniewskis. He paused, and then he said, and I wanted you to know that I'm okay, that things turned out okay. That sentence broke something open in me that had been sealed for 17 years, and I started crying in a way I could not have predicted or controlled. And he looked across the table at me with an expression that was half alarm and half recognition, like someone who has caused an effect they knew was coming but still did not know what to do with. I heard Ciaran's key in the front door. I stood up and went to the hallway, and I said to him, before he had taken his coat off, before he had seen the young man at my kitchen table, I have to tell you something. I should have told you years ago, and I'm so sorry that I didn't. Please come and sit down. He looked at my face, and he went still in the way he goes still when something is serious, and he said very quietly, Marta, I know. I stared at him,